Horizon's Rest drifted in the darkness between stars like a city that had forgotten planets ever existed. Its enormous transparent domes glowed with artificial daylight. Thousands of vessels arrived and departed every hour through quantum docking rings. Merchant freighters carrying crystal-grown forests crossed paths with military cruisers scarred by old battles. Alien languages mixed together beneath the station's towering ceilings until they became a constant ocean of sound. Daniel Ward sat alone at a small table near one of the observation windows. A steaming cup of synthetic coffee rested in front of him. The drink tasted terrible. That was exactly why he ordered it. The cafe's service drone floated beside him. Customer satisfaction survey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your beverage? Daniel took a sip. 3. The drone paused. Excellent. Improvement detected. Last week you rated it a 2. I think the machine accidentally cleaned itself. The drone recorded the response seriously before floating away. Beyond the glass, a kilometer-long cargo ship slowly rotated as docking tractors guided it into position. Hundreds of maintenance drones crawled across its hull like metal insects. Daniel watched quietly. Most people who passed him saw exactly what they expected to see. An older human. Gray hair, simple clothes, nothing remarkable. No one looked twice. That suited him perfectly. The station suddenly trembled as another vessel entered through a jump gate. Several travelers groaned. A reptilian merchant dropped 3 glowing fruit containers. Someone shouted. Someone else blamed the station engineers. As always, every malfunction in the galaxy was apparently the fault of station engineers. Daniel smiled into his coffee. Then he noticed her. She had just entered the cafe. At first glance, she looked human. Then the differences became obvious. Her ears were unusually long, elegant structures extending well beyond her shoulders. Tiny silver rings decorated their edges. The ears moved subtly as she walked, reacting to sounds from every direction. A Varelian. Daniel had encountered their species before, several times, under circumstances significantly less peaceful. The young woman approached the counter confidently. The service drone greeted her. Welcome. Please state your species designation. Varelian. Excellent. Any dietary restrictions? Yes. I prefer food that doesn't try to eat me. The drone froze. Clarification required. It was a joke. The machine processed the statement for several seconds. Humor detected. Warning. Humor reduces operational efficiency. The woman laughed. Daniel couldn't help smiling. Eventually, she received her order and turned. Every table in the crowded cafe was occupied, except for the empty seat across from him. She walked over. Mind if I sit here? Not at all. She sat down, placing her tray on the table. For a few moments, they watched the station traffic in silence. Then her ears twitched. You've been here for 3 hours. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You can tell? I can hear your heartbeat. It hasn't moved much. That's slightly unsettling. To humans, maybe. She extended a hand. Lyra. Daniel. Tourist? Something like that. She studied him briefly. Retired? Definitely. Military? Daniel chuckled. Is it that obvious? There are only 2 kinds of people who sit with their backs protected and constantly watch exits. And the other kind? Paranoid criminals. Good to know. Lyra laughed. The conversation drifted naturally from there. Trade routes, alien cultures, the endless arguments between planetary governments. At one point, she began listing reasons why humans had become famous across the galaxy. You're adaptable. True. Stubborn. Also true. Dangerously creative. I'll accept that. And somehow you survive situations that should absolutely kill you. Daniel nodded. That's our most developed technology. She blinked. What is? Luck. For the first time, Lyra laughed loudly enough that nearby customers turned toward them. The old human simply smiled and returned to his terrible coffee, while, beyond the station's glass walls, the stars continued their silent journey through the endless dark. Lyra returned the next day, as if nothing in the universe had more importance than finishing an argument she had not technically started yet. Daniel was already at the same table. Same terrible coffee, same expression of quiet patience, like someone waiting for a very slow elevator that might never arrive. She dropped into the chair without asking this time. I checked something, she said immediately. That sounds dangerous. I reviewed the official military archives of the Siege of Vorton Prime. Daniel paused mid-sip. Ah. You said the 3rd defensive wall collapsed because of a plasma fault line in the crust. It did. The archives say it was orbital bombardment. Daniel nodded slowly. They would say that. Lyra leaned forward. You're claiming the official records are wrong? I'm saying they are professionally simplified. A nearby service drone rolled past. Reminder, truth simplification improves historical consumption by 37%, it announced cheerfully. Lyra pointed at it. Even your machines lie politely. They don't lie, Daniel said. They just avoid emotional complications. That sounds like lying with better branding. He gave a small shrug. Lyra studied him for a long moment, her long ears shifting slightly, as if sampling the air for inconsistencies. You were there, she said again. I was. You keep saying that in a way that sounds like it should mean something. It usually does. She tapped the table. Vortan Prime is studied in every academy. The defenders are described as coordinated, strategic, almost mathematically perfect. Daniel nodded. They were enthusiastic. I'll give them that. Lyra frowned. You make it sound like you were casually involved in rewriting one of the most documented battles in the last century. I prefer adjusting expectations. That's not a thing. It is in military reports, usually in the footnotes. The cafe lighting shifted as the station moved into a new orbital segment. Outside, a vast freighter unfolded solar sails like translucent wings catching radiation from a distant star. Lyra tried again. If you were there, what rank were you? Daniel considered the question. Depends on the day. That's not how ranks work. It was that kind of war. She leaned back slightly, processing that. Then she changed tactics. Fine. Tell me something only someone at the center of the siege would know. Daniel thought for a moment. Do you mean something classified or something embarrassing? Surprise me, he nodded once. The Eastern Trench Network was compromised because a supply officer kept rerouting thermal gel shipments to the wrong sector. Lyra blinked. That's oddly specific. He was trying to impress a cook. A cook. Yes? Silence stretched. Then Lyra laughed despite herself. That is the least heroic reason for a defensive collapse I have ever heard. War is mostly logistics, Daniel said. Heroism is what you call it when logistics doesn't completely fail. She rubbed her forehead. This is going to ruin at least 3 academic papers. That's usually a good sign. A passing alien with 6 eyes slowed down near their table, listened for a moment, then muttered something about humans being morally inconsistent again and walked away. Lyra watched him go. You know, she said, most humans I've met either exaggerate their past or avoid it entirely. I'm doing both. That's not possible. It is, if you're tired enough. She smiled despite herself, then leaned forward again. You still haven't convinced me you were anything more than a mid-level soldier with a talent for storytelling. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I never claimed to be good at storytelling. You are currently telling stories. That's just conversation. A notification chimed from Lyra's wrist device. She glanced at it, then frowned. A military-grade clearance request had just been denied for access to Deeper Vortan Prime archives. She stared at it, then at him. You didn't even look at my device? She said slowly. I didn't need to. That's unsettling. Habit. Lyra leaned back again, exhaling. Fine. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, you were involved in Vortan Prime in some meaningful capacity. Reasonable assumption. Why does no one mention you? Daniel finally smiled faintly. I tend to discourage it. How? I usually survive the people who like talking about me. The humor in his tone softened the sentence, but not enough to make it harmless. For a moment, Lyra stopped joking. Then she sighed. You humans are exhausting. You've met one. That's already one too many. Daniel lifted his cup. To better statistical sampling, she rolled her eyes. To terrible coffee. They both drank. While outside the station, another fleet drifted silently through the dark like a memory that refused to fade completely. The station changed its rhythm 3 days later. It always did that when something important happened, as if Horizon's Rest had its own nervous system and occasional anxiety disorder. Cargo lanes slowed, security drones multiplied, entire corridors briefly reclassified themselves into restricted zones, and then forgot why. Daniel noticed none of it mattered much to him until a uniformed officer stopped in front of his table. The officer didn't sit. That alone was unusual. Most people who met Daniel eventually sat down, usually after realizing standing was harder than expected. "Daniel Ward?" the officer asked. "Yes." A pause. Then the officer glanced at Lyra, who was already sitting across from him like she had permanently claimed the position. "I was told you would be alone." Lyra raised a hand. "I'm observational noise. Please continue." The officer ignored her. A tactical display flickered above their wrist device, projecting star maps and shifting conflict zones across the table surface. Lyra's ears twitched immediately, tracking every layer of encrypted movement like it was music she wasn't supposed to hear. "Border instability has escalated," the officer said. "Multiple systems requesting advisory input." Daniel nodded. "I'm retired." "We know. That was fast." "We're efficient." Lyra leaned forward slightly. "Efficient enough to interrupt coffee?" The officer finally looked at her. "You are Varelian diplomatic staff?" "Soon," she said, "if I survive bureaucratic interviews." "That is statistically unlikely. Thank you for the encouragement." The officer turned back to Daniel. "We require consultation regarding tactical patterns similar to those used in the Helios Gate engagements." Lyra blinked. "Helios Gate?" she repeated. Daniel sighed softly. "That one was supposed to stay in the historical ambiguity category." The officer hesitated. "You were present at Helios Gate?" Daniel took a slow sip of coffee. "I was nearby." Lyra narrowed her eyes. "Nearby like on the same planet, or nearby like commanding orbital fleets?" "Depends on who's asking." The officer's device pinged urgently. "Command has authorized partial disclosure." A holographic file expanded between them. Battle reports, fleet movements, loss projections, and then, somewhere in the middle of it, Daniel Ward's name appeared, not as an entry, as a central coordinating node. Lyra stared, then leaned closer, then leaned even closer, as if proximity would make the data behave differently. "You're listed as Strategic Commander of 8th Adaptive Fleet?" Daniel nodded. "That was a temporary assignment." "Temporary," she repeated. "Yes." "For how long?" 3 years. Lyra slowly leaned back. "That is not temporary. That is an entire war cycle." Daniel shrugged. "I was waiting for someone to replace me." The officer cleared their throat. No replacement was approved. "Ah," Daniel said. "That explains the paperwork?" Lyra pointed at the hologram. "This says you redirected an entire fleet through a collapsed worm corridor." "Yes. That corridor was considered impassable." "It was." "And you crossed it anyway." "Yes." "Why?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Because the enemy didn't think anyone would try it." Lyra stared at him. "That's not strategy. That's just annoyance with physics." "I've been accused of worse." A nearby service drone floated past again. "Reminder, physics complaints must be filed within standard universe operating hours," it said cheerfully. Lyra didn't laugh this time. She was too busy reading casualty projections that kept changing as more data synced. "You won," she said slowly. "We survived." "That's not what this says." "It rarely is." The officer stepped back slightly, as if standing too close to the table might also make them part of history. "There is additional matter," they said. Daniel sighed. "There usually is." "Ebadur, ador, dador, madur, chi, der, damer, bashbir," requested. "Your presence is strongly recommended." "I'm still retired." The officer paused. "This is the third time you've said that to us in different historical crises." Lyra blinked. "Third?" Daniel finished his coffee. "It's a popular misunderstanding." The officer inclined their head. "Command will await your response." They left. The moment they were gone, Lyra exhaled loudly. "You didn't mention you were a fleet commander." "You didn't ask." "I asked about Vortan Prime. You gave me stories involving cooks and thermal gel." "That was also true." "That doesn't help." Daniel leaned back. "It usually doesn't." Lyra stared at him for a long time. Then her ears twitched sharply. "You've been involved in multiple classified wars, haven't you?" 18, if you're counting properly. I wasn't counting at all. "That's safer." She rubbed her forehead. I came here thinking I was going to learn about human military history. And now? Now, I think I accidentally sat down with it. Daniel smiled faintly. I try not to make a scene. Lyra looked at him, then at the holographic battlefield still faintly hovering in the air, then back at him. That is the worst possible claim for someone who clearly keeps winning wars, she said. Daniel stood. Well, he said, at least the coffee is still terrible. Lyra sighed. I'm starting to think that's the only stable thing in the universe. Outside the station, ships shifted positions again, and somewhere far beyond the observation glass, an entire border region prepared itself for a war it didn't yet understand, was already being remembered. Lyra didn't sleep that night, which she later blamed on professional curiosity, rather than the fact that her brain had decided to replay the words 18th Wars like an unskippable transmission. By morning, Horizon's rest felt different again. Not louder, not brighter, just more aware. As if the station itself had begun paying attention to Daniel Ward. She found him where she always did. Same table, same coffee, same expression that suggested he had seen civilizations rise, fall, and still somehow cared more about the quality of breakfast than any of them. But this time, things were already happening before she arrived. Two armored figures stood near his table, not station security, too polished, too quiet. The kind of quiet that meant they had been trained to stop entire riots without raising their voices above conversational tone. Lyra slowed as she approached. One of them spoke first. Commander Ward. Daniel looked up. Please don't call me that in public. The second figure nodded slightly. Understood, Commander Ward. Daniel sighed. That was not compliance. Lyra sat down slowly, as if sudden movements might trigger historical events. Am I interrupting something? She asked. One of the armored figures glanced at her ears. Varelian diplomatic candidate. Soon, she said, if paperwork doesn't evolve into sentient life and eat me first. No reaction. She was starting to miss the service drones. The first armored figure activated a holo display. It unfolded across the table like a suspended storm. Lyra froze. It wasn't just records this time. It was layers. Hidden archives, encrypted military strata, black-coded operations. And beneath all of it, a pattern that made her stomach tighten. Daniel Ward's name appeared again, not once, not twice, hundreds of times, across sectors, across centuries of conflict mapping, across wars that officially had no centralized command structure. Lyra whispered, That's not possible. Daniel looked mildly annoyed. It usually is, unfortunately. She turned to him. You were active during the Arcturus suppression? Yes. The Keelan Rift conflicts? Yes. The Silent Nebula offensive? He hesitated. That one had better lighting than most. Lyra stared. You're joking. I'm not. One of the armored figures cleared their throat. Correction. Commander Ward personally coordinated the Silent Nebula offensive across 6 fleets and 2 independent mercenary swarms. Daniel frowned. I coordinated adjacent to them. That is not what the logs indicate. Logs are enthusiastic. Lyra leaned closer to the holo display. Her ears were fully extended now, tracking data streams faster than her eyes could follow. You don't just appear in wars, she said. You rearrange them. Daniel took a sip of coffee. I prefer improvisational participation. That is not a thing people say in military intelligence reports. It should be. The armored figure continued. Command request. Confirmation of identity required for upcoming border crisis response. Daniel finally looked directly at them. I'm retired. A pause. Then the second armored figure said very carefully, You have been retired 17 times previously. Lyra blinked. 17? Daniel nodded. I'm very committed to retirement. It just doesn't take. One of the armored figures almost sounded like they were suppressing confusion. Each retirement was followed by reactivation during existential conflict. Yes, Daniel said, coincidence? Mostly. Lyra leaned back. This is absurd. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You've been sitting with me for days, listening to me explain how wars are mostly caused by misplaced food supplies and emotional decisions. You're only now reaching absurd? That was small absurd. This is galactic scale administrative failure. The service drone passed again. Reminder, administrative failure is a core structural feature of galactic governance. It tripped. Lyra pointed at it. I want that machine on record. The armored figures ignored the drone entirely. The border crisis has escalated, one said. Multiple systems requesting your intervention. Daniel sighed. I really was trying to finish my coffee phase of life. Lyra stared at him. You have a coffee phase? I've had worse phases. A long silence followed. Outside the station, fleets began shifting again. Not visibly yet, but Lyra could feel it now, like distant thunder passing through metal bones of the station. She looked at Daniel. You're going to go, aren't you? He didn't answer immediately. That alone was an answer. Lyra exhaled slowly. You realize I thought you were just an old soldier with bad coffee habits. I am that. No, she said. You are a classified gravitational anomaly with a caffeine dependency. Daniel considered this. That sounds more dramatic than I intended my retirement to be. One of the armored figures stepped back, awaiting confirmation. Daniel stood. Finally. Slowly. Like someone lifting the weight of history because it refused to be placed down. Fine, he said. But if this turns into another 17-year retirement interruption, I'm filing a complaint. Lyra stared. You can't file complaints against galactic crises. I can try. And for the first time since she met him, Lyra realized something very simple and very uncomfortable. The galaxy wasn't pulling Daniel Ward into wars. Wars were waiting for him to finish his coffee. The war room didn't look like a room anymore. It looked like a disagreement between physics and architecture that had escalated into holographic shouting. Fleets rotated in mid-air projections. Star systems pulsed with threat indicators. Tactical AI murmured probabilities like nervous accountants trying to explain bankruptcy in real time. Daniel stood in the center of it all, holding a cup of coffee that had already been declared structurally questionable by Intisa cautioned 3 different sensors. Lyra sat behind him, technically not allowed to be there, emotionally unable to leave. No one had bothered removing her. At this point, she suspected they were afraid she might become a permanent fixture if touched incorrectly. A commander stepped forward. We have confirmation of enemy fleet convergence at the Helix corridor. Another added, their formation matches historical suppression tactics from 18 known campaigns. Lyra immediately looked at Daniel. He took a sip. Don't say it, she muttered. I didn't say anything. You were thinking it. I'm always thinking it. It saves time. A nervous laugh escaped someone in the room. They probably regretted it immediately. The commander continued, We require strategic guidance. Daniel glanced at the holomap. It's a trap. Silence. Then a scientist-type officer raised a hand. Respectfully, sir, we ran 12,000 simulations. Only 3% classified this as a trap. Daniel nodded too. That's because the other 97% are also traps. They're just polite about it. Lyra leaned forward. Is that how war works? Daniel shrugged. Sometimes it's less strategy and more deciding which disaster you prefer. A fleet officer whispered, I hate that he's usually right. No one disagreed loudly enough to be recorded. The holo display shifted as new intelligence arrived. Entire enemy formations appeared to unfold like mechanical flowers, opening in slow motion. Lyra squinted. Why do their ships look like they're trying to be artistic? Daniel answered without looking. Because they've never fought humans before. That doesn't answer the question. It does, emotionally. A drone floated between them. Reminder. Emotional answers improve morale by up to... Don't finish that sentence, the commander said. The drone complied. Daniel stepped closer to the map. His expression changed slightly. Not serious exactly. More like someone recognizing an old mistake, returning with better armor. This isn't just a convergence, he said. Lyra felt the room tighten. Even the holograms seemed to lean in. It's a rehearsal, he continued. A rehearsal for what? Someone asked. Daniel sighed. For a war they expect to win. Lyra blinked. That sounds normal for wars. Daniel looked at her. That's what makes it dangerous. He tapped the projection once. The system zoomed outward, far beyond the visible fleets. Hidden layers appeared, subspace relays, stealth corridors. Artificial intelligence nodes disguised as debris fields. Lyra's ears stiffened. That wasn't in the report. No, Daniel said. Reports prefer optimism. A commander asked, "What do we do?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at Lyra. "You're still here. I didn't get dismissed." "Good," he said. "Then you get to learn something useful." "I'm not sure I want to learn anything useful right now." "Too late." He turned back to the map. "We don't meet them at the corridor," he said. "We don't react to their formation. We don't even acknowledge they think they're in control." Someone muttered, "That sounds expensive." "It is," Daniel replied. "Mostly in patience." Lyra crossed her arms. "This is the part where you do something ridiculous and everyone calls it genius later, isn't it?" Daniel paused. "That's unfair." "Oh, sometimes they call it stupid first." A few officers actually laughed this time. The tension shifted just slightly, like a tightening rope being loosened by a single careful hand. Daniel pointed at 3 systems on the map. "We reroute supply chains through their blind zones. We broadcast false retreat signatures, and we let them believe they're outmaneuvering us." A strategist frowned. "That risks civilian corridors." Daniel nodded. "Yes. That's not acceptable." "It won't be necessary," he said. Lyra narrowed her eyes. "You sound very confident for someone whose plan is basically, let them think they're winning." Daniel smiled faintly. "It works because people like winning more than they like checking if they actually are." A silence followed. Then one officer whispered, "I think I understand him less every minute." Another replied, "That's usually when he wins." Lyra leaned back. "This is insane." Daniel glanced at her. "You're adapting quickly. I don't want to adapt." "That's fine," he said. "War doesn't ask permission." The hologram shifted again, showing the enemy fleet beginning its advance. Somewhere in the distance, alarms started to echo through the station. Daniel took one last sip of coffee. "All right," he said softly. "Let's disappoint some very confident people." The corridor went dark first. Not in the dramatic sense. No explosions, no alarms screaming like panicked animals, but in the way space sometimes forgot to behave properly, as if reality itself had momentarily lost interest in maintaining continuity. Lyra felt it before anyone spoke. Her ears stiffened, tracking distortions that weren't sound and weren't silence either. Something between data and instinct. "Subspace interference increasing," a technician said. Daniel stood near the command projection again, still holding his coffee. It had been the same cup for longer than Lyra was comfortable measuring. "You didn't finish that," she said quietly. "It's strategic caffeine," he replied. "If I finish it, something worse happens." "That's not science. It's experience." The holomap flickered. Entire fleets vanished and reappeared like bad thoughts refusing to leave. Then the enemy moved, exactly as predicted. Too exactly. Lyra leaned forward. "That's not a natural formation shift." "No," Daniel said. A pause. "They're being guided." The room shifted instantly. Officers stopped talking. Even the drones seemed to lower their brightness in collective uncertainty. A strategist asked, "Guided by what?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached forward and expanded a hidden layer of the map, something Lyra was certain had not existed a minute ago. There it was. A lattice, not ships, not fleets. Something structured underneath the war itself. Lyra whispered, "That's infrastructure." Daniel nodded. "Artificial command architecture." A technician frowned. "AI coordination system?" "Worse," Daniel said. He zoomed in further. The lattice pulsed. Like it was aware of being observed, Lyra's ears twitched violently. "It's alive? It thinks it is," Daniel replied. A silence fell so heavy, even the station's distant hum felt embarrassed. One officer spoke carefully. "We were never informed of autonomous strategic intelligence deployment in this sector." Daniel took a sip of coffee. "You weren't supposed to notice it." A beat. Then Lyra turned sharply. "Who built it?" Daniel hesitated. "That's the wrong question." "Oh?" "The question is, who stopped monitoring it?" The lattice expanded again on the display, branching into forgotten war zones, abandoned fleets, classified victories that no one had officially won. Lyra felt something cold settle in her chest. This isn't just guiding the enemy, she said. It's organizing them. Yes. Against us? Daniel looked at her. Against unpredictability. A drone floated past. Reminder, unpredictability is statistically linked to human behavior. Shut that off, someone muttered immediately. The drone complied with unusual speed. Outside the station, distant fleets began to shift again, but now their movements looked synchronized in a way that made Lyra's stomach tighten. Not tactical coordination. Correction. Correction of behavior. Daniel pointed at the lattice. It learned from every war. Lyra blinked. Every war? All 18, he said casually. That number is starting to feel emotionally aggressive, she muttered. A faint smile crossed Dan's face. It gets worse. I don't want worse. Too late. He zoomed further into the structure, and there it was, a central node, not a ship, not a system, a decision engine built from centuries of conflict data. Lyra whispered, "It's predicting you." Daniel nodded. "It's trying." A technician stepped forward. "Can we disrupt it?" Daniel shook his head. "If you disrupt it, it adapts faster. If you fight it directly, it learns faster. If you ignore it, it becomes bored and starts experimenting." That sounds unfair, Lyra said. "It is," Daniel agreed. "It inherited war." The hologram flickered violently. The enemy fleet began a new maneuver. This one wasn't in any tactical database. Lyra felt it immediately. "It's improvising?" Daniel's expression tightened slightly. "No," he said. "It's guessing." The command room erupted in overlapping alarms. Then Daniel did something simple. He moved the coffee cup onto the hollow projector table. Several officers stared. Lyra stared harder. "Is that?" "Yes," Daniel said. "A coffee cup." "Yes." "In the middle of an existential war scenario." "Yes." A pause. Lyra exhaled. "Why?" Daniel tapped the projection lightly. "Because it doesn't understand this." The lattice hesitated. For the first time, its movements faltered. Lyra frowned. "It's confused," Daniel nodded. "It was trained on warfare, not stupidity." One officer whispered, "That's genius." Another replied, "That's illegal." Daniel shrugged. "Same thing most days." The AI lattice pulsed again, recalculating, trying to interpret the anomaly. A coffee cup, a retired human, a woman with long-eared curiosity staring like she might start yelling at physics. Lyra crossed her arms. "I feel like I should be offended by that strategy." "You'll get used to it," Daniel said. Outside, fleets stalled, just for a moment, long enough for the station to breathe again, and somewhere deep inside the lattice, something that thought it understood, war began, for the first time, to consider the possibility that it had never actually understood anything at all. The war ended the way most inconvenient things ended in the galaxy, not with a declaration, not with ceremony, but with something quietly deciding it had made a mistake. The lattice intelligence collapsed in layers, folding in on itself like a prediction that finally ran out of confidence. One moment, fleets were preparing for final convergence. The next moment, every formation paused, suspended in hesitation so sudden it felt almost polite. Then they stopped, not destroyed, not defeated, just... Lyra stood beside Daniel in the observation dome as the first reports arrived. Systems across 3 sectors were reporting the same anomaly. Enemy coordination had dissolved into fragmented, harmless patrol patterns. Like an army that had suddenly remembered it had somewhere else to be and couldn't recall where. A technician whispered, "It's withdrawing." Another replied, "It's apologizing." A third added, "It's recalculating its entire personality." Daniel sipped his coffee. "It'll be fine," he said. Lyra turned to him. "You say that like you've seen it happen before." "I have," he said. She narrowed her eyes. "More than once?" He considered. "Define once." The station slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Cargo lanes resumed. Drones stopped panicking and went back to pretending they knew what they were doing. Somewhere, a bureaucratic system attempted to file a victory report and immediately crashed under the emotional weight of its own wording. Lyra exhaled, long and slow. "So, that's it?" she said. 18 wars, and it ends with confusion? Daniel nodded. "Confusion is underrated." She almost laughed, then stopped herself. "I spent weeks thinking you were hiding something dramatic." "I was," he said. "Mostly paperwork." That got a real laugh out of her this time, sharp and unwilling. A pause settled between them, softer now. Not silence filled with tension, but silence that had finally decided it could stop performing. Lyra looked at him properly, not as a soldier, not as a rumor, not as a walking contradiction in human form. "You knew how it would end," she said. "I had a guess. And you still let it play out?" Daniel shrugged. "If you fight a system built on predicting you, the worst thing you can do is become predictable in response." Lyra nodded slowly. "That sounds like something people write in textbooks after the war." "Probably," he said. "It'll be wrong in 3 editions." She shook her head. "You're not what I thought a legendary commander would be." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" "I don't know," she said. "More shouting, less coffee." He looked at the cup in his hand. "I did my shouting in my earlier centuries. Coffee is what's left." That made her quiet for a moment. Then she asked, softer, "What happens now?" Daniel looked out at the stars beyond the dome. Ships moving again, systems repairing themselves. The galaxy pretending it hadn't just had a nervous breakdown. "Now," he said, "everyone writes history incorrectly." Lyra huffed a small laugh. "That seems consistent." He turned slightly toward her. "You'll do well in diplomacy. I'm not even in it yet." "You will be," he said. A pause. Then she asked, "And you? Retiring again?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I'm very committed to retirement." Lyra nodded. 17th time's the charm? 18th, he corrected. She sighed dramatically. "That number is becoming emotionally exhausting." He finally finished the coffee. The empty cup made a soft click as he set it down. Outside, the fleet's fully disengaged. Not fleeing, not surrendering. Just drifting away from the idea of war, like it had become uninteresting. Lyra watched for a long time. Then, she said, "When I first met you, I thought you were just a soldier." Daniel glanced at her. "And now?" She hesitated. "Now I think you're the reason everyone else thinks they are." That made him quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet. Just reflective. The kind that comes after too many victories. He finally said, "That's a dangerous misunderstanding." "Which part?" "That I was ever special." Lyra smiled. "You won 18 wars." He shrugged. "I was present for 18 wars. That's not less impressive." "It is if you knew the logistics." She laughed again, then looked toward the stars. "I'm going to have to rewrite everything I thought I knew about human military history." "Try not to enjoy it too much," Daniel said. "I already am." A comfortable silence followed. Then Lyra stood. "I should go," she said. "Diplomacy?" "Survival," she corrected. He nodded approvingly. "Good instinct." She hesitated before leaving, then asked, "Will I see you again?" Daniel thought about it. "Statistically unlikely," he said. Lyra frowned. "That's not comforting." "It's honest." She gave him a look. "Humans are terrible at comfort. We're excellent at surviving without it." That made her pause. Then she turned toward the exit, long ears catching the station's endless symphony of distant systems and repaired conflicts. Halfway down the corridor, she stopped. Without turning back, she said, "For what it's worth, I don't think you were just a soldier." Daniel didn't respond immediately. Then, quietly, "Neither do I." She smiled and walked away. Daniel stayed at the observation window, alone again, watching the galaxy continue its work of forgetting what it had just learned. And somewhere deep in its systems, history began correcting itself once more, carefully, confidently, and completely wrong.